think we're on. Good morning to people watching. I hope you're well. Let's see. Can't remember if I updated the embed on liveukulele.com or not. It doesn't look like I did. But now we should be good. So, can I hear myself? Yay. Great. Thanks for sticking around for the troubleshooting. That concludes that portion of the show. Thanks for tuning in. Kick things off at 10 as usual. Until then, I'll fart around and play a thing or two and tell you stories. Once upon a time. So we're going to talk about scales today. If you are, my camera's not in the ideal place. I can bring my window over here and I'm looking far to the side. I can bring it here and the chat is blocked by my camera. We'll compromise. If you haven't already, if you go to liveukulele.com and go to the scales page, there is a free batch of PDF scales that I made up a while back. They look really great. I love how they look. But that's what we're going to be talking about today is scales. So actually, you can look the preview image on the scales page of the C major is actually we're going to be working in C major just to keep it simple. But if you go to the scales page, that C major scale is going to be our kind of starting block for the lesson today. If you need it, you shouldn't necessarily need to look at that because what we're doing should be fairly straightforward. You can just follow along and I'll tell you what all is going on. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome, Dick. Thanks for joining us. I hope this lesson isn't going to go over your head. If you're like totally new to music and you need a refresher, I did a kind of a beginner series. Let's see, what's the easiest way to get you there? Did a beginner series back at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody had their kids at home and were freaking out about it. I think I'm not convinced the kids are all back in school yet, but it's definitely not as big of a deal. We're all pros at this by now. But where'd it go? Did I put it on a different page? Maybe I did. I did a live stream, a week-long live stream camp just for beginning players, and it would probably help you out if you haven't played it all before. Where's it at? I update the site and change things around and try and make it better and easier to use. And then I end up shooting myself in the foot because I don't know where anything is any longer. Ah, it is there. So on this page, throwing it up in the chat, that's got links. If you scroll down to the bottom, it's got the embeds for the camp cruising around down there. So that'd probably be a good place to start if today goes way over your head. Morning, David. I recognize some other names in there. Alistair, thanks for tuning in, man. All right. So ho, it's Tuesday again at 10 o'clock in Hawaii, and it's finally kind of sunny. It's been raining all weekend, just pouring down rain, and it looks like there's another gray cloud rolling in. I must say I have a great view out of my office window. Anyways, today I want to talk about scales and how to learn scales and incorporate scales and get more comfortable with playing scales. And so a lot of people learn this up and down, and that's good. It's a good starting point, but there's not really much meat to that, and it's not super useful as far as comfort on the fretboard. It's just like the notes live in those places, and that's it. That's all you know. You haven't done any time exploring. And so exploring the fretboard can be kind of scary because you don't know exactly where you're at or where you can go, which notes you can play. So what I thought I would talk about is a simple way that I've practiced a lot, where you're just shifting the scale up. You're retaining the majority of what you already have played and already know, but you're shifting the bottom of the scale to the top of the scale. And that top bit of the scale is going to be usually, I think it's going to be always two new notes, two fresh notes that you haven't played before in the little scale pattern, and you lose the lower notes. By losing the lower notes, you consistently keep, for our first example at least, I don't know if we're going to go beyond this or if we'll have time to go beyond this, but for the first example, we're going to use 6 notes at a time, 6 notes out of the scale. And by dropping the lower 2 notes in the pattern that we're doing and adding 2 more, every time we move, we're going to retain the 6 notes. And you're going to keep basically what are the middle 4 notes are going to remain the same. So there's always something familiar that you've already played that you continue to work from. So we're going to only be playing on the 2 bottom strings today. You can get out your nail clippers and clip off your 2 top strings if you don't want to think about them, or you could just ignore them. But just playing on the E and the A strings. And what we're going to play is C scale stuff, but I'm just gonna show you how you can kind of melt it up the fretboard, basically. So we're gonna start with the bottom 2 strings worth of the C major scale open position box that a lot of people learn, right? We have this one. We're just gonna use the 2 bottom strings worth of that. So it's gonna be open E string, 1st fret, 3rd fret, and then the open A string, 2nd fret, 3rd fret. All right, so get yourself familiar with that. Play it up and down. If you were to go backwards, it'd be 3rd fret, 2nd fret, open, 3rd fret, 1st fret, open. Right? So you don't have to play it in order. I give you permission to not play it in order. Just do something with it so that you get those locations, those note locations in your mind. While we're at it, while you're getting comfortable with that, think of the note names of what you're playing as well. So we're on the A string. Can't remember if we did a lesson on the chromatic scale or not. If not, shame on me. We should do that. So the E string is going to be our first note, E. And then you play F on the 1st fret. And then G on the 3rd fret. And then A, bottom string, open. 2nd fret is going to be B. And then 3rd fret is C. So E, F, G, A, B, C. C, B, A, G, F, E. Moving backwards. By having the note names associated with what you're playing, you're going to be getting a little bit more musically familiar with what you're playing as opposed to it just being like a note, a fret location on the instrument. That's a little bit static. And if you start thinking of it as notes, it's a little bit more generally useful because when you go to learn like a G scale and the F changes to an F sharp, you're going to already know where a lot of the F's are and you can just adjust accordingly. Whereas if you're just learning fret numbers, that's just one size fits all, one use, and then you discard it. And I don't like things like that. I like to be able to morph it into as many useful ways as possible. All right. So hopefully by now you've got this all dialed in. What we're going to do is you're going to take the lowest note on each string. So in this case, we're going to take the open strings and we're going to move them up so that they skip over the middle of what we've been playing and they go to become the next two highest notes in the scale on each string, right? So we had on the E string, we had E, F, G. So now instead of playing the E, we're going to play the next note up in the scale. So E, F, G, A would be the next note in the scale up, right? And we had our open A, but because our open A is going away, we're going to move it up as well. We need another A to keep the scale in order. So now our A is going to be up here on the 5th fret of the E string. So E becomes A, we've moved it up, and now we have three notes. Okay, so we went from E, F, G, now we're going F, G, A. And now our pattern is going to start from there. Same thing's going to happen on the A string. We take the lowest note, the open A, and we move it up to the next note in the scale. So A, B, C, then we want a D. So we're going to go up to the 5th fret on the A string. So now instead of the open A, you play the 5th fret. All right? And this is kind of the weirdest fingering of this pattern that we're going to end up with just because of the way the notes land on the fretboard and the C scale. This next, of course, the first place we move to is going to be the weirdest, but after that, it's going to get easier. And as you get used to the pattern and as you get used to moving it, it will become easier and it'll be internalized, the pattern. Okay. So now we're playing from F, F, G, A. Okay, so that's 1, 3, 5 on the E string. To play this, I recommend you try and use your pinky for the 5th fret. That's going to make it so you can play everything and stay in position. Right? Normally you play one finger per fret, which gives you a 4 fret span of wherever you're at on the fretboard. In this case, we're on the first 4 frets, but then you can always reach up 1 fret to stay in position, right? And if you were playing higher up, you could also reach down 1 fret with your index finger. That's a little more advanced. We don't need to think about that. All you need to know is that play with your pinky on the 5th fret if you can. So I would probably go 1st fret, 1st fret, 1st finger, 3rd fret with my 2nd finger, though you can use your ring finger as well. It doesn't really matter on the middle note. You can go either way. And then you use your pinky on the 5th fret. But that allows my hand to stay stationary and I don't need to slide up and down. If I play like this, my hand's got to go boop, boop, and make 2 moves to get to those 3 notes. So just stay in position and you'll be in good shape. Now, when we get to the A string, we've taken away the A, so we're starting on B now. And then we're going to play C and D. All right, I got to remember to look at you in the camera, not at the chat, and myself on the screen over there. So 2, 3, 5 on the A string. 1, 3, 5 on the E string. 2, 3, 5 on the A string. All right, try it all together. And you can go backwards. Right? And like harmonically, it sounds kind of weird because of where we're starting. But once we get into the pattern and we start moving it more often, your ear is going to become accustomed to the pattern and how it moves as opposed to the unique harmonic sound of each individual spot, if that makes any kind of sense. So we started with open, and we shifted the lowest 2 notes, the 2 open strings, up to to the 5th fret, because those on the 5th fret is where the next two notes in the scale live on each string. So now we would play. To get a little more familiar with it, try playing the pattern that we started with, the open strings, starting from the open strings, and then starting from the 1st fret on the F. So it sounds back to back, it would be like this. We'll go up and down. And then we go up to the next position. Right? It's a little abstract probably for you at this point, but once you get the idea of the pattern, it's going to start making more and more sense. Are there any questions about what we're doing so far? Taking the lowest notes, the two open strings in this case, but whatever the lowest note in the pattern is, we're going to take that lowest note and move it up to become the highest note on that string, but to the next note in the scale on that string. So we're just, if you were to look at the pattern on one string, all we're doing is we would just go E, F, G, and then you would start from the second note. So F, G, A, and we go up to the next note in the scale. And in F, G, A, the second note is G, so we'd start at G again, G, A, B, C, B, C, D. We're just hopscotch, not even hopscopping. That's not the right one. Words, at 10 o'clock in the morning during a pandemic. It's great. I love expressing myself. I love expressing myself while people are watching. That's even better. There's the rain finally. But the pattern is just going to be, you're going up 3, and then going down 1. Right? That's the pattern, and it's happening on both strings. We're putting it together so it's happening on both strings at the same time. Right? No questions popping up, so I'm going to continue on. Whether you're ready or not. Ready or not, here we go. So the next one we're going to do, our current pattern position was from F. Right, that one. Now, again, we're going to take the two lowest notes, the lowest note on each string, and hop it up to the next note in the scale on each string. So now our lowest note on the E string is F, and we're going to take it and we're going to hop it up to B. So now we're starting from G, and we're going up to the B. And now our lowest note on the A string was the B, and it's going to hop up to E, because E is the next note after D in the C scale. And so now our pattern gets to an easy place. Now it's just going to be 2 frets on each string. So we go G, A, B, C, D, E. 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret. So now it's an even pattern. And now everything from here on out is a lot simpler than what we've done. Okay. Try that going up and down. Now, let's try we got 3 patterns now. We've shifted twice, and the first pattern, so we have 3 different patterns. Let's try it from the very beginning, and let's just go up. We'll go up and up and up. Each time we start over, we're going to be on the next pattern higher. So starting on the open E string. 1, 2, ready, pick. And then we shift up starting on F. And then we go start on G. Right? So now our pattern is becoming, you're starting to hear the step up in the pattern because we've moved enough times. And we're going to continue on up. All right? After that, and if you want to run ahead and try and figure it out on your own, please go for it, because it's good practice to kind of like think yourself around those corners and see if you can figure out what the next notes in the scale would be, right? So because I've been blabbing for a while, I'll give you this next one. But if you want to continue on from there, we're going to just continue up until we get back to the beginning again. So until we get 12 frets up from where we started. Um, so if you want to run ahead and try and figure those out, and I can confirm them as we go, that would be great practice. Now, starting from G, we're going to take the lowest note, the G, and we're going to shift it up to become a C. Okay, now we're going to start on the A note on the E string. So A, B, C. And now our lowest note on the A string was C. That's going to become, we're going to take that away. So we'll start on D, and our C is going to go up to the next highest note after E, which was F. So D, E, F. So now our pattern is 5th fret, 7th fret, 8th fret on both strings. A, B, C, D, E, F. Following along so far? If you got questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, you're on your own. Let's try from the beginning, starting on the E and then working our way up through the 4 different patterns that we have going on now. Okay, so from open E, 1, 2, ready, go. And then starting on F, and then G, and then A, next one's going to be, we're going to take the 5th fret and erase that and hop it up to the next note in the scale. So now we're going to start on the 7th fret, 8th fret, 10th fret. That becomes a D on the E scale, on the E string. And then E, F, G on the A string. All right, just because we can, let's start from this new pattern, right? 7th fret, 8th fret, 10th fret on both strings. Let's take that and we'll go backwards all the way down to the open strings. 1, 2, ready, try it. And then F in the other direction now. And then E, starting on D. Okay, let's do a couple more and finish it up, and then we can address questions, and I'll share some thoughts with you of how this can be useful and how we can change it up. So we were on the 7th fret, right? Next one, we're going to start from C on the E string. Now we're on the 8th fret, 8th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret. Same for the bottom string. So now we have another 2 frets up, 2 frets up pattern. Okay. Try it from the A note, where we started on the A note and where we were playing 5, 7, 8 on both strings. And then we'll work up to the new pattern. 1, 2, ready, go. Starting from the 7th fret, and then the 8th fret, right? And if we do two more movements, we're going to get back to where we started, and we'll have made our way through the entire scale, starting from every note in the scale. Last one, since we're starting on the 8th fret and the C, we're going to move up. Now we're starting on D, D, E, F. This one gets weird again, so stick with it. If you're on a soprano, I apologize. We're leaving you in the dust because we're working off the end of your fretboard. But see if you can follow along in your mind and get the idea of what we're doing here. So 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 14, right? We're shifting, so now it's not mirrored on each string. So now we have D, E, F, G, A, B. And now we can finish it off by playing what we started with from the open strings, now just 12 frets up, 12th fret, 13th fret, 15th fret, 12th fret, 14th fret, 15th fret. And that's kind of hard to play, even on a tenor. But if you want it bad enough, you can try it and it'll put it all together. That is a huge kind of note unload onto your mind where you're just like, I don't know how to process this. But the whole idea is that you have reference points from what you've already played in the pattern before, right? You're only changing two notes, so four of the notes are the same. And as you get used to working in this style and kind of shuffling the bottom to the top, shuffle, 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 you can kind of, it's not as overwhelming as just like learning a brand new scale or remembering a brand new scale in its entirety. You're just trying to remember two notes at a time on two different strings. And if two strings is too complicated, you can take it down a notch by just playing on one string at a time. Because what we were doing, we were playing six notes, but you could just play three notes and get a nice little scale sequence that would work your way up just the E string or just the A string, right? We could play it. We played it. We all together. We were playing on both strings. Um, right, etc., moving our way up on both strings. But you could do the same exact thing just playing half of that and just playing on the E string. That is super useful as well. Same for the A. You would just start in the same place. A, B, C, D, and work your way up. Right? So you can split it in half if trying to play the six notes on two strings is too complicated. Play three notes on one string and split the workload in half, and you'll still be getting the main idea of what we're doing here. All right, so that would be like the level one of scale sequencing. You'd be on one string, and level two would be on these two strings. Then a more advanced player would try and do it like across the strings, up and down. But that's a super good little start. Um, Something else that we can talk about to sort of give it a new light would be we have all these notes that we've just learned. And if you can't like just pull a position out of your head because you don't have it hard memorized yet, that's fine. The whole point of this is that it gives you a reference point so that you only have to remember two new notes at a time. And when you learn those two new notes, you can just step by step it and work your way up through learning the scale piece by piece instead of trying to like, a lot of people when they get into scales, they download a scale sheet and they learn to play all of it, and then they come back the next day and they don't remember any of it because it was just so much information all at once, just like blah information, right? So if it's too much, you're not going to absorb it super well. But what what you're doing here is you're just simplifying and taking it piece by piece, piece by piece. And maybe the open scale and you recognize the two bottom strings worth of that, but you're not sure anything past that. Just take like the next two notes. And even if you just take the next two notes and you get used to those and you know that, okay, the next two notes on those two bottom strings for the C scale are going to be on the fifth fret, and it's A and it's D. And now you can play. And you have two new options, and this video was not a complete waste of your time, right? That is kind of the way to think about it, as opposed to like trying to just like nail that down. Don't worry about nailing it down. The idea is that it's a pattern that kind of informs itself as it goes, and you only have to provide two notes of information at a time. And the great thing about two notes, figuring out two notes, is once you have the pattern established, especially if you like have hard memorized the lower bits of the pattern and you start to see it, when you get up higher to the places you aren't as familiar with, once the pattern's in your ear, it's going to be super obvious when you're wrong. And you can just eliminate the wrong options and go like, well, that didn't sound right. It must be this other note. And it's only never going to be one fret away, right? If you play a wrong note, if I'm up here on the fifth fret pattern and it's supposed to sound like this, but I play and it doesn't sound like it fits in my pattern, because of how this works, I know I'm not going to go up higher because that would kind of break me out of, it'd be too much reaching. I know that I'm no longer in the pattern that we've had where it fits under four fingers plus a stretch. So instead of looking there, I would know that, oh, well, the right note must be just right there on the C note. Okay, so welcome to those who are just joining in. We're talking about scales and how to expand your scale knowledge across the fretboard in an easier way than trying to just hard memorize everything. Yeah, thanks for being here. It is drizzling here in Hawaii. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat so I know what needs to be addressed, what I've maybe missed, what needs to be explained better. No worries. I love questions. Okay. So I think the next piece of this is we've outlined the 6 notes that we can use. You could also use just 4 notes. You could do 2 notes on each string. And again, you're going to take the lowest note and you switch it out for the next highest note in the scale on each string. So in that case, if we were just playing 2 notes on each string, for instance, and you can really start this from anywhere. You can start this from any combination of notes, and I'm just choosing to start on the 2 bottom open strings because that's easy, but I could do the same exact thing by starting on the 8th fret of the E string and the 2nd fret of the A string and just following whatever the pattern is, and the pattern will, work you through the correct notes that you would play next. But to keep it simple, we're just going to play on the 2 open bottom strings and start from there. So if I was to only play up 1 note on each string, I would play E to F and then A to B because we're in the key of C, so we're staying within the notes in the C scale. So we're going to end up skipping some notes. So E to F, A to B. And then the next bit is you would start from F and go to the next highest note in the scale. So now you'd go F to G and then B to C. And all these moves should look somewhat familiar, but now we're only using 4 notes. And then we're back to the beginning. So that would be a little bit more bite-sized, but we're not actually playing the scale in order now. Now we're skipping from E, F to A. So we're skipping that G note that would normally be in the middle. So by doing that, you're creating a completely different pattern. And so what this is called sequencing, right? It's just a numerical pattern basically that you can take and work a scale through. And it can be a million different things. The sky is totally the limit, which is why I think this is so valuable, especially for advanced players, right? You can play this as a beginner. You can go through what I've talked about and you'll get it. But as an advanced player, the sheer amount of possibilities from this basic thing it kind of encapsulates the entire problem of being an advanced player, is that, oh, I want to be able to do all these things amazingly, but you get lost in thinking that, like, oh, it's got to be this fancy la-ti-da kind of picking that's super crazy, but it's not. That's what it took me a long time to realize this, and I know a lot of other people struggle with this as well. But that being an advanced player is just having more options and knowing more ways of putting notes together. And so by exploring this sequencing thing, you can really create way more options than you would ever come up with on your own just by forcing yourself in a box and saying, okay, this is going to be my pattern. This is how I'm going to play it. Right. So, something else you could do is you could change and we'll still be in the key of C, same note locations, just changing the pattern. You could play one note on one string and say three notes on a different string. Okay. And now what I want to do is I'm actually going to go back to playing the scale in order. I'm no longer going to jump around um, like we were doing just a moment ago, not the earlier bit of the lesson, but earlier, just a moment ago, we're going E, F, and then A to B, where we skip the G in the middle, going from the F to the A. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play three notes on the E string and one note on the A string. And it's going to be like this. I'm going to play on the E. That looks exactly like what we were doing at the beginning of the video with our 6-note pattern. But I'm only going to play the first note of what we were doing on the A string. So, and then when I move up, it's going to be exactly the same again. But now when we play on the A string, we're only going to play the first note of what we were just doing. And then the next one is we'd go from G Now we're back to the beginning. Now, so by doing three notes on one string, one note on another string, you're getting a completely different pattern. And it's so great. I love doing this kind of thing because you're playing the scale, but it's completely different from how you're used to hearing it and from how most people play it. Most people play the scale. That's it. Maybe they play like alternating thirds where you go C, E, D, F, E, G, and you hop back and forth like that. But that's as far as 99% of people will go. But if you want to go that extra mile, and it's not difficult, that's the beauty of it, is it's kind of a simple thing, but you can create like a brain teaser puzzle that gives you these extra options just by changing where you play things that you already know, right? I could do the same thing that I did, but instead of playing three notes on the E string, I could play three notes on the A string and one note on the E string. I would just reverse what I was doing before. So before I was playing E, F, G, A, and then shifting, right? That was my pattern before. Now, what I could do is I could play, and just to keep the scale in order, you don't have to do this. You could um, just start from the open string, but to keep the scale in order so that I'm playing, you know, sequential notes in the scale, I'm going to start from G on the E string. And then that's going to be my one note on the E string. And then I'm going to switch to the open A for my, that G is going to go up one fret or up one, sorry, in the scale. And then I'm going to play three more on the A string. And then next note in the scale on the E string. It just helps you navigate the instrument so much better because you're learning to play out of the box. You're learning to play things in a way that you don't normally think about. And just by having that vocabulary of note combinations really puts you at an advantage, I believe, as like an improviser or figuring out melodies or arrangements. And you know, This is a fairly basic thing. I would say this is like an intermediate level if we're talking like traditional ukulele levels. This is like an intermediate thing that I would expect most intermediate players to be able to figure out. But the usefulness of it is going to come kind of down the road with the comfort of the instrument. So I don't think there's any harm in practicing this stuff as an intermediate player or even as a beginner player if you're figuring this out. Um, it's not, it's never bad to practice these kinds of things, but it's going to become, it's not until you get to maybe a little bit more advanced content that you start expressing yourself with this and you go like, oh wow, yeah, playing those sequences of the scales, that really makes me feel like I'm free in what I'm playing now. That's a little bit more advanced now that I'm moving across the fretboard and playing in the kind of the in between positions. So that's sort of that thing, but everybody plays certain things in certain places. Do you play something as simple as, but why don't you play it somewhere else? Why don't you play it an octave up and see where you could put that, right? Or I could play the same thing and start here, or I could play it here. You can play all these notes in many different places. That's the complexity of the ukulele matrix on the fretboard, right? We have all these linear lines, all these linear note lines, but they're staggered. They start in different places. And because of that, you get multiple options for playing different notes, which is why a fretted instrument is usually more complicated than like a piano, because on a piano there is one location for middle C, bomb, and it's right in the middle of the piano. And each note only gets one place. And the octaves just repeat on their way up and down. But on an ukulele, we have there's lots of different locations for each note. So by practicing things like these scales, you're going to start seeing the different possibilities of playing melodies that you already know. Because just because something is written on the tab a certain way doesn't mean you have to play those notes in that location. When I was working for James Hill, this is sort of a little bit of a side story, but I think it's kind of a useful insight. When I was working for James Hill on the Ukulele Way project, when he started, he only had tab for the very advanced pieces because the simpler pieces at the beginning lessons of the ukulele way, they were super simple, like pentatonic melodies. And he showed those in standard notation because it was fairly straightforward and easy to read. But it was also, he put the effort into creating the tabs because the tabs for advanced pieces were highlighting specific fingerings. The tab was used to show where on the fretboard the notes were occurring, not just what notes. Because when you play a simple pentatonic melody, it doesn't matter where you play it because it's so simple that it can occur in different places, assuming you have the range and the note knowledge. It doesn't really matter where the notes happen because it's simple. But when you get into a more complex arrangement where you're trying to make certain things happen at certain times, then the fingerings and where on the instrument it happens is super important. So I always thought that was very interesting because people were clamoring right away. It's like, we need the tabs for the simple songs, because I think it's certainly a comfort thing and people were used to reading tabs and they weren't so used to reading standard notation. But from a teaching perspective, I thought it was super interesting in that the tabs weren't really relevant for those super simple songs because you could play them in many places. So, all that said, when you see a tab or you learn a melody, don't only think of that melody as existing in that one place. See if you can find it in other places because you can probably at least move certain notes. I mean, if you're playing like on a high G ukulele or whatever, you only have middle C in one place. So if the melody uses middle C, that has to be where you play it. But for other notes, explore the matrix and see if you can figure out where else they live. I think that's one of the more practical applications of all this sequencing practice is seeing where the different notes are. And especially if you think of the notes in your head, don't just think of the fret numbers. Try and name the notes, the actual musical notes that you're playing as you go, because then as you move down the line and you realize, oh, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is just C, C, G, G, A, G, then you can start relating that to other places on the fretboard. So I think that's pretty much the end of my spiel. Does anybody have any questions about any of that which we've talked about? I feel like this is super important stuff, not talked about nearly enough, but there's only so much I can give you, because it's like, here's this little teeny tiny thing that is just so simple, but then you can take it and just the doorways just exponentially open up in all the different possible ways you could play this. You can play, just as an example for anybody out there who's feeling like this is old news, um, play odd groupings, play 2 and 3, because like you can play the same number of things on the string, and playing in fours are easy, but go 2 and 3, 3 and 2, play 3 notes on one string, 2 notes on another string, playing in 5, and play them evenly in 5. That's super good practice too, is a lot of people will play something 1 2 3, sorry, I'm blanking out now, 1 2 3, and they'll leave a little gap before they go to the next one. Right, there's a little bit where they leave space, but try and play it like so everything's straight. So you get that kind of off and on flow, which is super super interesting. Uke for free asks, do you offer some tabs for that? I'd like to think that's a joke question, you're making fun of me, but no, not specifically. There is a page on the website, let's see if I can find it, on sequencing, where I do have some tab examples. Let's see, sequencing, right here. I believe, yeah, there are tab examples on here to give you some ideas. This is just like a super, I'll put it up in the chat. It's a super limited amount of the possibilities, but it might help some people visualize the patterns and how it moves across the fretboard, because the matrix is super confusing. The fact that we have multiple places for notes on the ukulele and everything's like different distances from each other, it's all very confusing. But if you can kind of crack the code and get in there and just like realize that sequencing is just like, oh, 1 2 3, go back 1 1 2 3, go back 1 1 2 3. It's always just a number pattern. And if you can figure that out, there are lots of possibilities for you. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to throw up the Discord link. If you haven't already, come join us over there. It's a little bit quiet, but I'm hoping to kind of like get some more people online and get some more discussions going. I'm on there pretty much every day. I'm happy to answer questions about the lessons or other ukulele things if you've got them. Please subscribe to the newsletter on my website, liveukulele.com. There should be a sign up window on the homepage for that. Keep up to date on news, things like that. I did schedule this next YouTube live out in advance, so if you go over there and click the little bell or remind me or whatever, you get a notification for next week, same time, same place kind of thing. Okay, so got a question in there. Jackie asks, then do you do the same thing on the top strings and the middle strings? Yes, it all applies. The same exact thing that we were talking about applies. It's just that the location of the note for the given scale is going to change. So like we started out doing 3 and 3 where I was playing on the first 3 notes on the open strings, the first 3 notes of the scale. You can do the same thing from like on the 2 middle strings. The thing is though, the tuning changes, so you need to compromise a little bit on that. So for instance, if I were to play up 3 on the C string, I end up on an E note. So I'm not going to want to start on the E to keep the scale in order. So instead I would start on the F on the E string. So it would be C, D, E, F, G, A. And then you would take the lowest note in the scale, hop it up to become the next highest note on the string. So now you would start D, E, F, G, A, B. You can work your way up. And because of the way the tunings happen and because of that shift, you can see in the middle I'm like shifting up to get the notes on the E string. That's where you might change your pattern a little bit to make it fit a little bit nicer. Like on the C, you could go 3 notes on C and 2 notes on E, and that would balance things out a bit. So you could go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So instead of having that last reach, which kind of puts you out of position, it keeps it a little bit more intact. But yes, all this stuff applies to any of the strings. All you need to do is just figure out where the next notes are going to happen, and then you can shift everything up accordingly using any of the patterns that we have talked about today. All right. So thanks again for tuning in. Same time, same place next week. Yeah, hit me up in Discord with any questions you might have about any of the content here or in any of my other videos. And yeah, I'll see you down the road. Take care of yourselves out there and practice, 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 practice. Okay, aloha.